have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors, some of the wrong ones too.
You have to start looking at the world in a new way.
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
We should have
Welcome
just
back.
used... Yeah, it's already going well.
Welcome back to the best films of 2019 part 2. Heads up, there are spoilers in this, but it's only after we clearly say we're about to be talking about spoilers. So enjoy the first however long it is before that. It's Real Opinions, back again with the bi-annual podcast. This time...
At this point, it's like, do you ever watch like The Royal Family or anything like that, where they now just do episodes like every so often they'll do a Christmas episode and that's it.
Right.
Like once every 2 years there's a Christmas episode and that's all they do now. They're not doing full seasons anymore.
That is a really British TV show thing to be like...
Yeah.
By the end, they seem to have more specials than they did actual episodes.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was it, about a minute before recording, you did say there's no tangents.
I'm done. That's
And
my
then
one.
they were
That's my one per episode.
We both went into giant metal cylinders wearing masks and went out into the brave open world to go and see Tenet in cinemas.
Yeah.
We've braved the outside world and put our loved ones at risk in order to see a very confusing, very garbled film, like with really messy up audio, and it's just very hard to, comprehend.
How was the actual experience for you? Because mine was actually, I found myself thinking, I hope cinemas stay like this indefinitely, because there was like 2 other people in the cinema who were perfectly silent.
Oh yeah,
I loved
imagine
it.
for you it was probably best. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. The only negative was there was a fly in the screen, and it kept. I guess there was no one like, no one was coming in to check the screening like normal.
Yeah.
This is the cinema experience I've missed. Just staring at the shadow of a fly for half the film.
Did you see it in IMAX?
No, I don't. There's no IMAX in.
I was glad when I got out and I started reading all the comments of people online and finding it wasn't just IMAX people that found it incredibly hard to hear everything, because I just assumed that, I know that there is probably, like, with the projection at least, there's more technical quality behind an IMAX cinema, but I do find, like, it's just their excuse to turn all the audio knobs up to 11 and just bombard you with sensors.
Well, that's I've not seen many films in IMAX. Like the extent of my IMAX experience is like, when you go to like a museum and they have like an IMAX.
Right, and it's the planetarium section.
Yeah. Or there were a couple I saw in Southampton with you. We saw Crimson Peak, which is designed for IMAX.
Oh yeah.
And
I forgot about that, yeah.
And my biggest memory of that was that it started with like an advert for IMAX, like showing off the IMAX experience, even though we were already in the IMAX experience. So I really don't know who they're trying to appeal to with that. But it was just that. It was just like a load of loud noises. And then it went like, ta-da! Well, yeah, no, I saw it in a normal cinema.
It's about 5 minutes in. We should probably talk about the film at some point.
Yeah.
Tenet. I did like it. I think I liked parts of it more than I liked the overall thing, if that makes sense. Like, I liked sequences and I liked ideas and I liked particular moments. But overall, I found it to be kind of jarring. And not just from I didn't understand it, but I mean just from a pure, like, storytelling point of view.
I agree with every word you just said.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
The way...
No, it's very, very difficult for me to be too critical of a film that at times was as amazing as this was. Like, even though I agree with you that it is heavily flawed, when there are individual sequences this amazing, it's hard to not be caught up in that instead for me. I don't know if you feel the same way, but like I almost forget about a lot of the problems that I agree are definitely 100% there, because I just watched someone have a really cool fight where one person's going forwards and one person's going backwards, and that's
Yeah.
the thing that sticks with me instead of all of the problems.
Yeah, I could understand. Like the thing that I keep coming back and thinking about is like I really loved. Like I remember briefly scanning through like the log lines of reviews, and just being a general like middling, and then sitting through that first introductory sequence at the opera and just getting just that was so well done, that first action sequence, and just thinking, this is great. I don't see what the problem is. It's going great so far.
That was how I felt for quite a lot of the film, actually. Was because I saw a lot of people say that it was Inception to the power of 10 in terms of how intricate and convoluted it was. And for the first like half, I don't really think it is.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
it
I
hit
felt
a
the same way.
certain point in the narrative where I went, oh, now I see.
It sort of had, for me, it had a real like like radioactivity, like Half-Life quality. Where it starts good, and then by like, and it just gets progressively like as it gets towards the end, I just get.
I think I could pinpoint the section for me where it starts, and I think it gets exponential from there. But I would say around the point that character enters is around the point where I start to go, hey.
Yes, yeah, actually, that's a really good point.
Slow
Yeah,
down a little. There was nothing individually that I necessarily couldn't understand, but it goes so fast at that point. It's like 1,000 concepts at once that are largely mumbled at you, and you're like, yeah, what? We'll get
Shall
on
we
to
take
the
this
sound
moment
mixing
to just-
later, but
So I was going to say, do we want to just take a moment just to say here that it's pretty hard to get into the nitty-gritty of the film without talking spoilers?
yeah, I suppose.
I think
then should
we're fine up to this point.
We just do like a little shorter roundup then, just before we get on to the spoiler part, like that very, as if we had written a review where we couldn't spoil anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think. Well, although I could class some of the acting as like a little bit wooden, I enjoyed most of the characters throughout. Like there wasn't much characterization like behind
No.
protagonist, but I think that he did his David Washington did the same as he did with Klansman. I think he gave a bit more of a like an undertone to the kind of what would otherwise be quite a bland character if played by maybe another actor, like less talented actor. Robert Pattinson I really liked. I think the cinematography was great as it always is in a Nolan film. The music, when it wasn't being too much, I enjoyed.
Okay, I thought the music was fine.
I didn't love it. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite score of the year or anything.
No,
but I would say that it was enjoyable, and it did sell. I could tell at points where it was trying to sell the concept through the music.
I think the way I would sort of, it's like a lot of, I know it's not Hans Zimmer, but like a lot of Hans Zimmer scores, because even though it's not Hans Zimmer, it felt very much like the guy was given the brief to do a Hans Zimmer score. Like a lot of the ones that Hans Zimmer does for Christopher Nolan specifically, it was like a good effect-driven score, in the sense that
Yes,
it's
to
not,
sell the experience, not
Yes.
to listen to on its own.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not got like memorable motifs. It's not a particularly pleasant listening experience. It's just good at accentuating the action and creating atmosphere, which is fine. But I think I don't know. I think I've heard that type of score be done better. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a fine Nolan imitation score.
I found the editing it did offer clarity for like a lot of the action scenes, which is what I'm basically looking for in editing in that stuff. And then as it seemed to get on, as with the concepts, it seemed to get progressively more jarring with the cutting to the
Right.
point where I don't think the editing was helping the sense of confusion that came with the concepts.
So
Or the
on the note of the coherence of action and editing, for the most part, I think the action sequences of this are incredible. The fight in the
Yes.
airport, brilliant. The car chase, good. The extended climax,
Yes,
I
I
found
think we both agreed with that.
absolutely disorienting, because this is not a story spoiler, so I feel like I feel fine to include it in the non-spoiler section. You have a bunch of characters that I know they have ribbons like blue and red to sort of distinguish them, but they're all moving very fast. It's very hard to tell who is who, especially because everyone's got masks on, and it's editing between them with seemingly no connective tissue or rhyme or reason between why we're cutting to this person now versus why we're at this person here. And because that particular action sequence is filled with people moving in different times to each other, it just becomes... like, at that point, I was just watching to watch explosions and spectacle because I had no chance of following what was actually happening. I was just like, oh, that building exploding was cool. I don't know why it exploded. I don't know who exploded it, but it was cool.
Yeah, I felt like I was just kind of grabbing at like whatever was in the frame I could like
Yeah.
cling to as a reference point in some ways. It felt like, in more ways than one, it felt like when there's like a new shooter out or something and I just see like 5 minutes of footage from it and people are doing like powers and things and I have no idea what is actually happening, what the tactics are, like what the map is. Like, I feel like it felt like editing was a large part of it alongside the actual like production.
Just conceptually what was happening.
Conceptually, yeah, it was a sequence where I felt like I got the gist of the concept prior to this, and then it just I found myself asking more questions about it during this sequence, and it's just handing you like a box of jigsaw pieces and just like say like you handle this. It's just throwing random pieces at you.
The other so my two major problems, there are individual things that we can get into in the spoiler section. One of them was that I felt, not that the film inherently was too confusing, but that I don't think it explained itself in the best possible way all the time, especially in that second half. And the other major problem I did have, and I've not always had this problem with Nolan films, I've had it with some, but not all, was in this particular case, I did find the coldness and the distance to all characters a little too much. I don't think it, like, for example, I know some people said it when Inception came out, some people said that Nolan was on the verge of becoming too much of a technician and not enough of a storyteller. And I don't think that about Inception. I think Inception does have heart and does give me, at least through Leonardo DiCaprio's character, an emotional hook. I disagree with that in terms of Inception. Certainly in terms of Interstellar, which at parts verges on being sentimental and sappy. This film, I felt like it was just too distant, to the point where we literally have a character called the protagonist, who I know next to nothing about, apart from that he doesn't drink when he's on the job, and that he likes Diet Coke. And then the only character that it really gives you any kind of emotional connection to is the Elizabeth Debicki's character. But even then, I don't know, it didn't feel like enough where I really kind of want my protagonist to be someone that I can engage with. And I agree with you that the performances are not the problem there. I think that John David Washington did his best to inject that character with personality, but there's only so much that an actor can do when the script is deliberately kind of holding the character at arm's length for a lot of it.
See,
And
I don't particularly mind it with. I agree with you about this feels like, in many ways, his coldest film.
yeah,
And I don't think that it helped the concept, because you're focusing entirely on the concept and
Yes.
trying to figure that out, as opposed to just going along with it because you like the characters and you want to
Exactly.
see where they're going.
you're watching Inception, and you regardless of whether you understand the internal mechanics of the plot, you
Yeah, you're rooting for
presumably
them.
care because you want Leonardo DiCaprio to get with his kids again. Or in Memento, regardless of whether you understand the chronology of what's happening, there is an emotional hook of you want to see this guy get revenge for his wife.
Well,
That's-
exactly. And so, for instance, with Inception, I mean, they introduced the mechanic right at the very beginning, but a majority of the central section where they are using like the dreams mechanic is it's hooked around an emotional event. Like it's
Yes.
hooked around trying to get Cillian Murphy's character to like talk with his dad,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
And it's hooked around an emotional idea and a concept, sort of, and that roots it in a lot of ways. And I feel like they try to do that with Tenet in a certain way, but it feels, as opposed to Inception, where it feels like it's ingrained in the why they're doing this. It feels kind of separate in Tenet, which makes it even more jarring. And then
Yeah.
it's jarringly done outside of that as well. It feels unclear why it's connected. That's how I think. Like if they put more of that emotional core, filled it out a bit more, and made it more tied to the concept, I think people would have less questions, alongside
Right.
the whole, final battle thing.
Yeah. This film is purely plot driven. If you think of
Yeah.
those that kind of rule that apparently scripts are supposed to abide by, where you cut out anything that isn't necessary for the plot. This is
Yeah.
like the ultimate version of that to a fault, where every dialogue sequence is someone explaining something. It's somebody. It's chess pieces moving around, and you never really get a moment where people are just people. And I really feel like it could have done with a scene where the characters were just allowed to talk about something other than physics or Soviet closed cities. Like if there was just a
Yeah.
scene where they were allowed to be warm people, I think it would really, 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 really benefited the film.
I think I have like a point to make on that, but it's not like it doesn't. My thought wouldn't have any spoilers, but it's sort of a generalization of how I viewed the plot that I don't want to. You know how
That's fine,
sometimes
yeah.
you can read someone's opinion and it paints how you're seeing it
Yeah.
as you see it. I
Sh-
wouldn't want to do that.
Shall we? I think I've got the majority of my big points out of the way. It's technically amazing, apart from the sound mix. And the action sequences are stunning, and I think it's nice to watch a blockbuster that has ambition, which this definitely does. And for the most part, I did enjoy the plot until it just became overwhelming towards the end.
Yeah.
And overall, I did like the film. I just have a number of problems with it. So that's my non-spoiler overview.
I think we have basically the same opinion on it.
Great.
As pretty, we seem to align more and more as we do more of these, and I don't know it's because we're doing more of these or just because we're actually changing separately. Yeah, okay, I'm happy to go into a spoiler section now, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Cool. So, warning here, stop listening. When I came out of it, I tried to find like two analogies to explain how I felt about it. And the first one I came up with was, like in an Ocean's 11 heist film,
Yes.
you always have this, they've got a plan and then they go into the action and then a few things go wrong, something goes like cocks up, and then just at the very last moment, the main guy goes, actually, I planned for this all along.
Yeah.
And then we have a flashback and then it shows you like the really satisfying stuff where it like shows you clips from a different perspective, like
Right.
things that you haven't seen that they've actually planned for the whole time, and it shows that was the plan all along, and it's like this really satisfying like bet you didn't see this moment. and then it all comes together to a conclusion. This felt like, in a way, is like one of those heist films where it's set up for one of those, and then like it's set up for like it gets to the final moment, and they're gonna show this back like loads of clips showing about how they set up to this, and then it doesn't have that. Like that's how I felt with how Robert Pattinson's character was treated in the final moments. I felt like we were gonna see a load of almost like a montage of things setting up how we got to this point in reverse, sort of.
I mean, it doesn't.
And then I never got that.
It doesn't show you, but there are a lot of clever little things that I do remember about Robert Pattinson's character that do actually have renewed significance in retrospect that I really liked. Like, just the little things for the most part, like the fact that he knew that he didn't drink on the job, not because it's his job to know everything, but because he actually
because he knows
knew
him in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
cool.
liked clicking that stuff once I came out of it, but I also feel like I was expecting like more clips or something. Like I was expecting like, especially as like, I think a lot of people will come out of it and not necessarily, and just because it was so far back in the beginning, but they will forget that Robert Pattinson is the guy that saves him in the opera in the beginning.
Yeah.
And like, it was sort of a thing where it took me about 20 minutes after watching it to be like, oh yeah, there was a guy that saved, like, not that I didn't connect it, but because it was so far removed from the rest of the plot, I was just thinking back to the opera scene. I was like, oh yeah, that was there. And I felt like there was like another version of the film where they have shown, like, if they'd shown a clip towards the end cutting back, I don't think it's, you know, over explaining to an audience. I think you get that kind of satisfied, like, things clicking into place.
I agree.
That I think was missing at the end of this film to really help people feel a bit less confused about everything.
The thing is, they sort of hint at doing that with the
Yeah.
part where she dives off the boat.
Yes.
Like there,
yes,
they
exactly.
there they actually do. They do the visual like here, see,
Yeah,
but they
it's
don't
sort
do
of
it
like
anywhere
that.
else.
Yeah. And the other way that I kind of had thinking about it was that it felt almost like a book adaptation. Like, it felt like someone had been handed a really massive novel that's like a really dense spy thriller about this time travel stuff, and someone had to condense it into a single screenplay, and they were like cutting out loads of character moments and scenes and other bits that kind of help pad out the world and explain the world more, and they just had to put it into a film. I say that not just because it feels like stuff is missing, but it feels like, you know, in certain adaptions, they don't explain certain things to you because they expect you to already know it in some ways.
Like Harry Potter.
And it felt
does that a lot.
like Harry Potter does that with a lot of the magical stuff. Yeah, because they don't want to explain everything to you.
Harry Potter never explains what happens to Sirius Black in the movies when he falls through that weird gate thing.
I don't think they do in the books much.
Do they not? Well, they don't. They certainly don't in the film.
I mean, it's the Department of Mysteries, so I assumed it's a mystery. That's what I always led to believe as a kid. But yeah, like in the films, they've got a deadline to meet. They've got to get it within like this 600, 700 page book within 2.5 hours.
Yes.
So they've got to get a move on, and that's how it felt with like, it felt like there were scenes or moments where I felt like I should already know more about this. Like it's treating it like I should know more about this, and I just don't.
I know they're real things, but for me, that is exemplified by the moment where Michael Caine says something along the lines of, "Have you heard of the Soviet Union closed cities?"
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Yes," and then they just move on. And I was like, what? Like I could just envision half the cinema going, "But I haven't," and they just don't bother. They're just like, "No, he has, so screw you." But I know this isn't exactly the point that you were making, but when you talked about the whole heist thing, and the heist analogy, and you mentioned that there's a period of setup, and then something goes wrong, and then you see at the end that actually they
it all planned out according to plan.
The part where something goes wrong is also quite interesting to me, because in a heist movie, you know something's gone wrong because you understand what the plan was in the first place.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you
That's a good-
understand the plan,
Yeah.
then there is tension when the plan does not go exactly right. It's like that's like the Hitchcock thing. I think
You got to show the bomb under the table.
Yeah, or I think it's Dial M for Murder, where they spend like a long time explaining what the character's like scheme is, so that when it goes wrong, you feel the tension because you've known the scheme in detail, and then that's not what's happening, so you feel the tension. In the case of Tenet, especially when it comes to that final action sequence, I was so hazy on the goals of what people were trying to accomplish, at least in terms of the individual mechanic. Like, I knew the gist. I knew what the overarching objective of everybody was, but I wasn't necessarily clear on what individual characters were trying to accomplish in that given moment. That it meant that even though the music and the editing was telling me I should have been excited and on the edge of my seat, I kind of wasn't, because I didn't know, for example, I didn't know if things were going badly. I didn't know what...
Yeah.
I was unsure what the... Not what the stakes were, but I was unsure what the... I guess what the situation was. I didn't know if this was a case where I should be, like, biting my nails and going, oh no, or if I should be going, good. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. Because I didn't understand the individual characters' missions in that particular sequence.
Yeah, that whole we're in the spoiler section, so we could just talk freely. But the whole pincer movement thing was just so confusing. Like, and
It's like drawing on the fucking board with like arrows moving.
Yeah.
We're like, what?
Like, the thing is that it was always like the way that I mentioned it earlier, where I just said it just kept adding questions.
Yeah.
Because I kept feeling like, now I get it. And then they'd do something else, and I'd be like, what's happening? Like, they'd say, we've got to get to this bomb. They've got this mysterious enemy, which I feel like I never saw. You know, they're shooting wildly at something. I never really see, like, I feel like I never saw an enemy get shot in that whole sequence for some reason. But I get like, so one team is going from the future and one team's going from the past, and they're gonna both attack at the same time. Make that okay, that's fine.
Yes.
That makes sense to me.
Yes, I agree.
And then it cuts to I think it would just make so much more sense if you just showed the people going backwards in time, as opposed to being forwards from their perspective.
Yeah. It
just led to so much. Ugh.
Again, I don't think that there's anything in this film that is too confusing as a concept. It's all to do with the rate at which it delivers exposition. Often the mumbling or the unclear audio with which they're delivering that exposition. But it just feels like, especially in that climax, like it is just throwing stuff at you. And you're not really... It reached a point where I felt almost like I was incentivized to stop trying and to just go, okay, like, fine, I'll just trust that this makes sense. But should we talk about... We've kind of mentioned it several times. Should we talk about the sound?
Yeah, we can come back to the finale later. Yeah, the sound, I think everyone's touched on it at some point, but the sound's just garbled. It felt like half the scenes while I was watching it. It's probably a lower percentage, but there are just a number of scenes where you just cannot make out what they are saying whatsoever. And it's intentional. It has to be intentional.
It has to be, because there's no way that a director who gets everything else so technically precise and so immaculate can be so deaf on one particular aspect of his film. There's no way that someone who has such an eye for detail and is so concerned with everything being just right and is so much of a champion of like the cinematic experience, there is no way that he's just got blinders on for this one particular thing. But it's really weird because it's not always been a problem. It kind of started around the Dark Knight Rises time. And I know people complained about it with Interstellar as well. I didn't remember...
People complained about it with The Dark Knight, if you remember. People talking about the Batman voice was hard to understand.
Well, that's different.
Just because he's a bit raspy.
Sure, yeah, that's slightly different. That's more to do with the performance, I guess. But when you get to Bane, that's like an audio effect that they have deliberately put on. And
they did change it, though, didn't they?
What, the Batman voice?
No, they changed the Bane voice.
Well, they did. Because apparently it was even more confusing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the Bane voice with The Dark Knight Rises. There were also, like, for a lot of people who did see it in IMAX, there were complaints generally of the music drowning out dialogue and things like that. These complaints trace back to The Dark Knight Rises. People mentioned it with Interstellar. I don't actually remember Interstellar as being that bad. Obviously, Dunkirk doesn't have much dialogue, so it's not.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. Also, that's, like, a lot of it's overwhelming on purpose. Yeah. And it's so... Ironically, compared to this film, it's so simple, you don't really need to care that much.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Such a simple task that you know what's happening.
I have, like, a weird theory, and it's my usual conspiracy theory that I think I've mentioned before on this podcast. And it's probably wrong. But I just have this weird gut feeling that Nolan is such a champion of seeing things in the cinema that he kind of wants to dissuade, camcorder recordings of his films, because can you imagine how difficult it would be to hear what is being said in Tenet if you were watching, not just a pirated copy, but a pirated copy that is someone, like, filming on their phone in the cinema. It would be completely incomprehensible. And I know that this is, like, studios have admitted to this before, that they, like, make films deliberately dark sometimes for that reason, because
I haven't seen that before. I mean, I've seen a very dark film before, but I haven't seen that quote.
It's a thing they do to try and discourage piracy. They make their films, they set films at night, or they deliberately make them poorly lit. And I just wonder, is that what's happening here? Is it just a way to stop to make people go and see it in IMAX like you want?
I think that may be an added benefit thing. I don't think that's his full, like, battle plan. But I agree that it's something that I haven't thought about. But yeah, watching anything with, like, a deep bass is so much harder on a cheap audio device. And
the irony is, it just makes me want to watch it on Blu-ray where I can put the subtitles on.
Oh yeah, exactly. It just makes me want subtitles, and then, like, I will definitely, the next time I watch it, I will be watching it with subtitles, regardless.
And it's not just the mix. I know a lot of people are focused on the audio mix, but it's also just the fact that he's obscuring people's faces for so much of the film, so you can't read their lips, which does help you understand what people are saying, even if it's subconscious.
Oh yeah,
people
definitely.
have got face coverings on. And they're talking over... There's a bit where Kenneth Branagh's talking over a walkie-talkie. So, I can't see it.
Are you talking about the boat bit?
No, I'm talking about the end, where I guess, he's on a boat. He's talking over a walkie-talkie. And so I can't see his face. They've obviously... They've made it sound like he's on a walkie-talkie and they're underground while explosions are happening. And he's talking in a slightly garbled Russian accent. But he's explaining why the future have declared, like, war on the past. He's explaining a very, very, very crucial thing to understanding the story. And for some reason, he's like, yeah, but I don't want him to hear it. I don't want him to know why.
I'm going to quickly run through my points regarding the audio. Which,
you've got a list.
It's more that there's two particular scenes. There's two particular things. Like, for instance, I've seen people, like, say, like, it will be scenes where, like, they are on the boat, which I know is a big one for people.
When they're on the yacht, the super yacht thing. Yeah, that was...
And, like, where they're wearing masks, and people saying, like, well, because they're wearing masks, it's hard to record audio. That's actually not true, because when they're on the yacht scene, they literally have microphones up to their mouths.
Yes, they do. It makes it even more confusing because, again, they make them sound like crappy microphones. So,
yeah, but you can get a decent size microphone for that size, and you can do noise reduction and everything. Like, it's a thing of... And also, when a character is wearing a mask, you can put a microphone inside that mask and get a clear recording. Or exactly like people have said, like, if they are wearing a mask, it's a lot easier to ADR them.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier. So it is, like, to me, that just signifies that it's a complete, it's a choice. As well as the one scene where it really bothered me, the audio... The other ones were garbled, and I could kind of just say, like, okay, I'm tuning out for this scene because I'm not going to understand it. I like it would go for like 1 or 2 lines, and I just think I'm not going to strain to hear because I'm not going to pick up anything. The one where it really bothered me was when just after the first version of the car chase, and they bring him into the room, and it's the first time you kind of see the turntable properly. You see Kenneth Branagh his double comes out backwards out of the on the blue side of the room, and it will do a thing where, like, so he's talking backwards.
Yeah,
but you hear him talking backwards, and then you hear the audio fast forward. But there's a slight delay. 2, you can still hear him talking backwards in the background. And 3, you've also got the people yelling to him in normal time behind him.
Yeah.
So
I know
you've got
exactly
3 versions of Kenneth Branagh talking at the same time.
I'm so glad that you picked this scene because I think this was the point. Like, I know I said earlier, I can pinpoint it as the moment when Aaron Johnson arrived.
Yeah, and Aaron Johnson shows up just after this. Yeah,
but it was specifically this bit where I was like, I don't know what's happening, and it was because I couldn't properly hear what Kenneth Branagh was saying. I heard like phrases just like BMW. Like, the characters in the scene could understand him, and it was frustrating me.
If you hadn't have done it again, I would have been even more confused, because the fact is that I could hear him clearer the second time round.
Yeah, that scene is probably the point that I can identify as that's when it started to become too much, too obtuse.
Yeah, and the fact that then, like, Aaron Taylor Johnson's character came in, swarms more characters coming in. This was all an operation all along, and it's so confusing to be like, what? Why?
Can we also address, this is, in the grand scheme of things, quite minor, but I still find it to be a problem, even if it's not, a major one that I would deduct, several points for. The main character in this film is so receptive to all of these crazy ideas to a point where like the first time he sees a bullet fly into a gun, when they're explaining the concept of inversion to him, and he catches the bullet in the gun, he is so collected. There is no moment where he is remotely amazed by this, and this kind of comes into the two problems that we've already mentioned. One, that it feels like it's, your point about condensing a 600-page book. Like, in the longer version, there might have been a point for him to express amazement at this completely crazy idea. But secondly, it also adds to that cold feeling, because we have a character who just is not impressed or excited by this insane shit. And the part where Aaron Taylor Johnson, like, shows up, again, he just accepts it. He just accepts it all, and then gets into the time turner thing himself without any questions, without any sort of visible sense of fear or anything. He's just like, okay, I've got to do this now because the plot says I've got to do it. And it bothered me that I had a main character who didn't seem to care about the concept of the film itself.
It was, I didn't find too much of a problem with him reacting in that way. What?
It needed an Ellen Page from Inception.
Yeah, you mean like a younger character that's like excited to be part of it. You mean?
Yes.
It needs like an audience conduit.
Yes, it needs an audience conduit. That's exactly what it needs.
It feels weird to say this coming out of it because it is quite such a high concept film, and we're talking so much about it being very dense and dropping a lot on you at once. But there's a weird conflict where I feel that, and also at the same time, I feel like they didn't do that much with the concept. They do the car chase, they do the one fist fight, and that's really about it.
Again, I want to emphasize that one fist fight, for me, even if I didn't enjoy the rest of the film, which, even though it sounds like I didn't, I did enjoy the film.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not cool.
But even if I didn't, that one scene, I think, would just make me like the whole film, because I thought it was so fun and so cool.
I definitely enjoyed the fight scene, but it was a case of I was expecting, with the big finale coming up, I kind of just wished that they went for a smaller scale ending in a lot of ways. Like, I know that Inception, as it goes on, it does get progressively
bigger.
The thing is, it gets progressively bigger, but it also has the clever thing of it reduces the characters, and also it's coming to this one emotional point at the end. It's coming to a singular moment that then once you get to that moment, then it all unravels back and it all comes back again. Whereas with this, I felt like it was, rather than fining down to a fine point and then coming back again, it just sort of funneled out and it just got bigger and bigger scale as it went on.
It's weird that the biggest action sequence was the least interesting action sequence in the whole film.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a thing where it was interesting when it was a small select number of people are aware of this inversion, and it's a thing that's happened in the future, and it's a thing that we're fighting. And then all of a sudden it just seems like this was a secret at the end of it. It's just 100 people on each side fighting in this massive battlefield. And is this a secret? I have no idea. You've just got a load of hired goons to know about this this world-changing, time-changing invention. Yeah,
and it's just a case of when it's that fist fight, you can focus on the cool inversion.
Yeah,
it's all about how the inversion affects a standard fist fight there. Whereas when you've got this massive sprawling battle, it's less focused on the inversion gimmick and more just sheer chaos happening everywhere.
Yeah. I have a few more points that I want to get through. If there's anything that you've got listed that we could go back and forth on.
Nothing is jumping out to me at the moment. But if something comes up while you're talking, I will be sure to interrupt.
I realized when we were talking, I realized one point that was really sold to me. This the point that I got where it felt like there was a lot more information that was maybe written or in a law book somewhere, and the bit was the algorithm, which I find completely unnecessarily confusing. One, for the fact that it's an algorithm. Why is it called an algorithm when it's
a
object?
Physical thing? Yes,
exactly.
That confused the fuck out of me too.
Because it's an algorithm is it's not a physical thing. Also, it's the fact that just call it the formula. Just the one changing of word makes it so much less confusing. That was one very minor point, but it just added to this whole what are they doing? And the fact that they were so the bad guy, Kenneth Branagh wants to get this one piece. And it's fine. Oh no, he's got this one piece. What now? He goes back in time to talk to this woman that seems to have more information.
I have no fucking clue what that scene was about. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Because it implies that she works for Tenet, right?
Sort of. I'm not sure.
Because the implication is that she deliberately let Kenneth Branagh steal. She set it up so that Kenneth Branagh would get his hands on that part of the algorithm. That's what they say.
Yeah, because
Why?
She doesn't tell him. Yeah.
Why? Why did she do that? This is the one thing that I'm still I still don't understand.
I'm going to get back to my algorithm point in a second, but it's this weird struggle with the film where I feel like multiple times a character expresses, probably the protagonist expresses, yeah, we know this is going to happen, but why can't we change it? And the characters just sort of say, just because. Yeah. And it doesn't really feel like they ever try to do it. There's no ever moment where they clearly try to undo try to undo what has happened, and they either like fail because it's destined to, or like something glitches out or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
and I kind of get why, because they don't want to do that, because the central conceit of why people in the future want to do it is based on the idea of, can you do it or not? Which is another point I'm going to get to, of why do the villains want to do this? It was a weird, jarring thing of, that's always a thing that you always have to establish in a time travel concept is, can the past affect the future? And do you want to do Time Turner, where everything's already happened regardless? Or do you want to do Back to the Future, where you can change everything? The point that I was trying to get to before with the algorithm was that he goes back and he talks to the woman, and then she just says, you know, it was this thing that was discovered where this was one part of 8 pieces of this algorithm.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, so they've got to get the other pieces.
No, he already has them.
Yeah, she's like, yeah, he already has them. Why are you saying that it's this thing that needs 8 pieces or 9 pieces or whatever? Like, that's the thing where it felt like that was in the books. Like,
right.
You got like a previous scene where Kenneth Branagh intimidates someone and gets one of the last pieces, and he's like, finally, just one more to go. Like, it felt like a Harry Potter. It was like if the Harry Potter Horcrux thing happened. I don't know why we're making so many Harry Potter references, but it's like if Harry Potter found like the ring with Dumbledore, and Dumbledore was like, oh, this is one of Voldemort's 7 Horcruxes, and Harry's like, where are the rest? It's like, oh, Voldemort's got all 6 of them already. Why make 7 of this thing?
Yeah. Just
say it's like it's just an extra level of confusion that was completely unnecessary, that I think like exemplified in a smaller sense what was the issue with a lot of the bigger story problems.
Sorry to return to this point, but I feel like when I asked it as a question, I wasn't being rhetorical, I was genuinely asking you a question. Why did the woman supposedly allow Kenneth Branagh to steal that part of the algorithm?
Again, that was me sort of answering it with, I assumed that it was some sort of idea of the faction that we are following, the faction that want to save time, believe that things happen as they should. Things are kind of destined to happen, and that if you kind of break, or if you try to change things that you know happen, then you're just asking for trouble. That's kind of what I was led to believe.
I was going to ask a follow-up question, but I don't want to get into the mechanics of time travel, because I think that it's quite a boring thing that people do when they nitpick, like, I don't know, Back to the Future or whatever. Like, I really don't care about paradoxes and stuff, so that's fine. As long as if that's the answer, fine. Okay. That's
the thing, is that I'm of two minds of it, where effectively, like, it's like a Back to the Future thing. Like, you know, there are probably, like, I've never gone into it, but I bet there's loopholes, like plot holes with Back to the Future. But the main point is that I feel like I get it, and then when I watch it, it's not a confusing experience. I feel like I understood what they were setting up with the time travel, and it acted on it, and it made complete sense to me by the end. The problems that I have with time travel, and when I do want to kind of nitpick and understand, is when I don't understand, like, after watching the film, or I don't feel like, or I feel like things are contradicting on a major level.
Well, if I ask you I'll explain what the question I was going to ask is, but I'm not necessarily raising this as a genuine criticism, because, like I said, I don't care. But if what you're saying is the organization wanted things to proceed as planned because they can't change the future, and they need everything to follow like a preordained sequence of events. Do they not therefore also know that the world doesn't end?
I don't. I suppose it's like, it's a case of they do know that the world doesn't end because they've reached the point. I think the problem that they have is that people are trying to send stuff back in time to do stuff that didn't happen, and they're trying to stop stuff that didn't happen.
Yes.
Before we jump off, you know, the timey-wimey stuff,
Yeah.
I want to. I'm gonna make one more like point, which is my whole. So the whole argument is that Kenneth Branagh, he
Yeah.
is just a conduit for what the people of the future want to do, and in the
Yes.
future they've invented. I know I'm sounding like I'm an explainer video, but I'm talking it out what I think,
I know,
and I'm
I
waiting
know.
for you to contradict me and say no, you
Okay.
forgot this.
Okay.
The people in the future have invented this inversion. They've figured out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And what they believe is that, the classic grandfather paradox, that if you go back in time and you kill your past self,
Yes.
it's actually fine. Like,
That's,
you
yes.
can actually kill your past self and you will still continue to exist.
I got the impression that it wasn't so much that they believed it was fine, as much as they were in such a desperate situation in the future that they were just going to have to take the chance.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea was that like their world is uninhabitable because of things that the previous generations had done.
Right.
And I think they were in such a desperate situation that they were basically going to take the risk.
Right. So, and that's the kind of it was definitely, it had this weird climate change like moment at the end where Kenneth Branagh is just like it's cause of climate change, where he's explaining, in the future the environment's completely destroyed here, like you said, the planet is inhabitable, so they want to go back, and they think that if they kill everyone on Earth somehow in our current time, then that will mean that we don't produce the CO2 emissions and everything, we don't destroy the planet, so that where they are, it will just suddenly be fine, and that's it.
Yes.
Which sounds like just crazy talk to me. Like the fact that somehow in the future, just the fact that, so they believe that, it just sounds like the kind of idea where someone's been handed this inversion plot element, and it's just like, and it's one of those teenage boys that's just like, Thanos was right, like, all you gotta do is just kill a bunch of people and that will solve every problem. Like, do they not think that surely you could just, if you've got all this future technology, can you not just send someone back in time to then be someone of power and change things? If you think killing everyone in existence will not damage the timeline, then how will going back to try and fix things instead of destroy everything?
Also, everything in existence. It's not every human. Like, if you...
It's everything. It's every animal.
Yeah,
it?
So, like, if you kill all the bees, for example, that does irreversible damage to our ecosystem.
Yeah,
and without
it
the
makes
animals...
no sense.
if all of the animals and living creatures are killed, then the planet is probably still going to be uninhabitable.
Like, it just made it made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. That is assuming that you and I are understanding it correctly.
Exactly, and that's the kind of thing where I kind of, it would have made me more annoyed in the film if it didn't take me like 10 minutes after watching it to be like, was that what they wanted to do? And then on the other hand, to also be like, I remember watching it just thinking like, there's probably something I'm missing or something I'm not understanding, which it can't be that. Like, that can't be the reason why, right?
If we compare it to the Thanos thing, with Thanos, there's the fact that Thanos is insane. Like, he's not supposed to be right. He is supposed to be wrong.
Yeah.
And B, as far as I understand it, and I mean it is cosmic space power gem nonsense, but like the way I understand it is that he clicks his fingers and whatever he kind of wants to happen happens. That's how Iron Man is able to click and restore everything. He just kind of thinks of what he wants and it happens. I assume that Thanos was able to click and get rid of like humanoid life. Like he didn't. I assume that Thanos did not wipe out like half of the birds and half of the
it's the fact
rabbits
that,
or whatever. I assume he deliberately just picked humans. But if the thing that's happening in Tenet is happening, it wipes out all life. And does that also include plants?
But the main thing is that it's funny that there's more thought to it. That this seems like a ridiculous concept in the Marvel film.
Yeah.
In Infinity War, the character seems to like the power to do this has been somehow given, because I believed that it was just humanoid stuff as well in the Marvel stuff, but they kind of let you just think that. Whereas this one, it fully just states, this is everything. Like, this is just everything dead.
Yeah, that is something I hadn't even thought of, but you're right.
One last note I have written down,
Okay.
which is I want to just see if this is what you thought as well, where at a certain point in the film, where you're just thinking ahead and you just suddenly you just have something clicks and you're just like, what's going to happen next. I had a moment where I was so certain that Robert Pattinson was Debicki's son.
Oh, no, I didn't, but go on.
I thought it was so clearly set up, like, so many times that Robert Pattinson was Elizabeth Debicki's son, that's why I also felt like I said about the heist film thing?
Yeah.
Like, I was fully expecting there to be, like, another sequence at the end where it shows Debicki, like, raising her son, and the son becomes Robert Pattinson, who then goes back in time to help out.
What made you think that?
And that's how Robert Pattinson knows everything. It was just from the way that the son was given such importance in the plot. Like, the fact that when they're explaining, the future wants to kill everything, and that's when Elizabeth Debicki goes, including my son. Like, yeah, of course it includes your son. They said everything. You don't have to add that line. That was the power of love line from Interstellar for me, was a similar thing to the including my son. Like, obviously her son is important to her, but it felt like there was also the fact that they kept focusing on the son thing. And I thought also it was going to be a case where when right at the very end, when she was her future self and she just killed Kenneth Branagh and was just about to jump off the boat, I thought the son was going to look up and see her and realize that there were two of her, and that was going to be like his start of his recollecting that something is up, and like them talking about how he's got the finest education, blah blah blah, and just the fact that he looks like the guy, like he's got the kid. I mean, they look similar, like they've got the same hair color. They're both English.
Have you looked up to see if this is a fan theory? It probably is.
I mean, I thought it was true, and I was so certain that it was going to be the case. And like, especially when at the end where they add that random tag onto his backpack. When I first saw the backpack, like the tag on the backpack, when he's looking down at the dead body, I knew it was Robert Pattinson. But I was just like, oh, they've probably established this keyring at some point and I've forgotten it. And then I didn't realize that they established it afterwards. But I thought it was then they were going to do a thing where that was going to be like Elizabeth Debicki handing the kid that. And it was going to be like a thing of, oh, that's how they say it, or something.
Right.
It was a weird time to add a random totem to this character when, just for the sake of, we're going to tell you he's already died, but he hasn't really. Like, it's going to happen. Now I feel like I'm just like, I've put on like a tinfoil helmet and I'm just rambling at you.
It's an interesting idea, but I didn't think of it. No. I also didn't think of your whole point about the villain's plan not making any sense, and now you've completely destroyed that for me.
Because as well, it's at the very end, he was saying, we're friends for a long time, like we've known each other for longer than you know. And I thought it was then going to have like the fact that he's with Elizabeth
dad.
Debicki. Yeah, he's sort of like his stepdad.
Dad.
Yeah. And that's how he knows everything, because he's told him while he was growing up. And then he goes back and does it.
Right.
I have found an article online from 2 days ago that says, is Neil Max fan theory explores the greatest mystery?
No. That's a shame. You could have started the most insufferable fan theory.
I saw it with Alice, and I whispered it to her, and she could have like nodded like, oh yeah, like it's definitely this. And then she leaned over at some point and just said, we don't know Pattinson's name. And I just realised, and we got to the end, and he just said, Neil. And we both looked to each other. It was like a moment of, oh, they did say his name. It's just so boring we forgot it. But anyway, yeah, I was so certain of it. Like, I was so certain, and then no.
Well, I mean, it was a good idea, Jack. I'm sorry that it didn't turn out to be the case.
No, it's
It
not.
can
It's
be
not
your
one of these.
head. It can be your head canon. That's what they say, right?
Yeah, that's what the kids say. To clarify, I'm not saying this is like, oh, the film would be so much better if they used my ideas instead of Christopher Nolan's ideas.
I know.
I'm not one of these people where their whole review is my shitty rewrite of what I think should have happened.
Sorry, this is my second tangent. I haven't had one in a while. Doug Walker recently did a review of The Incredibles 2, which was
What a tangent.
which was exclusively him just proposing his idea for a completely separate idea for The Incredibles 2. It wasn't the skeleton of a story that exists for The Incredibles 2, and then saying how he would change it and how he would improve it. It was just a flat-out, completely different idea, and his review was just him basically pitching his version and saying, why didn't they make this?
And so I assume all the comments are just like, oh my god, the film would be so much better. Or like, let him write your next film, Pixar. Yeah. It's fully driven by ego, those reviews. Like, it's nothing...
You have to review something on its own terms.
Exactly.
Whatever those terms
I have no problem with someone saying it would be better if you did this and like actually used what was given with the film.
Yes, exactly. You can propose. You can sort of say how the specific way something played out wasn't the best and how it could have potentially played out better, but you can't just throw in your own ideas and say this is what they should have done.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't do like a ground floor rewrite.
You can, for example, talk about like the rise of Skywalker, and you could say it would have been better if they stuck to what they had already established in The Last Jedi. You can do that. That's fair, but you can't just completely propose your own separate story with your own separate characters and everything. You can't do that.
Oh yeah, and to be fair, and I know what you're saying the same thing, but I'm saying in the purpose of a review. I don't care if you want to do like a fun video where you're like, this is what I would have done. I don't mind that. I mind when it's under the guise of a review, and you're saying like, this is my critique of a film that I watched. So here's a film that I imagined in my head, and I'm going to explain it to you for 90 minutes.
Well, I know you've been deliberately avoiding them, but I'll just tell you now, that's exactly what every Last of Us 2 quote-unquote critique is.
Right.
That's what every single one of them is.
I already know exactly what the number one point is, and this is without having a single spoiler for the game, but I know it's about one character living. That's all I know, is that it's just, this character should have lived. And which surely I just imagine must be the whole backbone of the entire story of the second one. Anyway, any other points on Tenet?
No. Although I do feel like I've been far more negative than I intended to be, so I do just kind of want to.
I think it's less that we're being negative. It's more that we're trying to pass out what we like. Why did they do certain things and trying to understand it more.
Yeah.
Like,
I want to emphasize that for 75% of this film I was completely engaged. Towards the end I did my interest did wane a little. And I really thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the action and the set pieces, and I don't mean that in a kind of dismissive like, oh, the action was good though. Like they were ridiculously creative and fun.
Oh yeah, like I was fully enjoying it. Like for the whole first half, it was just full enjoyment of it. Like,
exactly.
Just can't wait to see what's next. It's just when a film leaves you with so many questions at the end.
Yeah.
When you're left to talk about it afterwards, you've just got to talk about what you thought the answers to those questions were, as opposed to the stuff that actually made sense to you while you were watching.
Yeah. And I think because there's so little to talk about with this film outside of the plot, because the characters were just conduits for the plot.
Yeah.
It necessitates that the discussion becomes about these individual intricacies, because there are very few scenes apart from the action sequences that exist for their own sake, if that makes sense. You know, like in a Quentin Tarantino film, there will be dialogue scenes that are there to be entertaining dialogue scenes in their own right, or to flesh out the characters.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't make it so, because it's always like people say like padder, filler, whatever. It's not like to bulk things out. It's just to round off the edges, like to give a more of a look into the world of the film.
Just something other than purely plot machinations.
Yeah.
And because this film is built entirely of those scenes instead, it means that you're left to talk about this stuff, because that's what's given to you.
Yeah. I also don't think it helps that it's all at the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not, in a sense. Like, there's a whole bunch of exposition in that first half, but it's at the end where it starts to feel like it's cramming it into space that doesn't exist.
For the stuff that I really enjoyed, the whole first half and all the action scenes, bar the very end one, I really enjoyed it. It's just at the end, I just felt like I just wish it kept with the scale and the scale of the idea that it had in the beginning, and just ran with that for the whole film.
Do you think that it would have been better if the stakes of the film were not apocalyptic?
Yeah, definitely. I went a bit off track comparing it to the Inception ending, but I think if you'd made it a smaller scale ending, it would have been vastly greater in... Look, it had so many cool ideas, and I felt like it just went too big at the end, and it didn't focus on what it already had.
I think the last minute introduction of an entire army that know about this was perhaps something I would have got rid of.
In a lot of the promotional material, it's talked about, and this kind of ties into an idea that I was going to say earlier, which in all the promotional material, it's talked about as like a spy thriller for a lot of it, and I'd agree with that. Like, it's sort of like, and a lot of people have said like it's sort of the closest Nolan's come to his own Bond film, and that's why I think I didn't mind the protagonist being such a kind of enigma, because I think that's sort of filling the cliche a bit, and I don't mind that. It's kind of fun that he's that sort of character, but I think it does the spy thriller thing really well with the weird concept as well for 2/3 of it, and then at the end it just drops it to be a full-fledged action film. And
the thing is, because I think that perhaps in a way that feels quite Bondian, because like a lot of those old James Bond films do end with James Bond and like an army.
That is true. They do raid, don't they?
Base.
They do a lot of enemy bases. Like they raid.
But
I don't know which film it is, but I know they go to the volcano base, don't they?
Yeah.
To get Blofeld. Yeah.
And so I wonder if that was what he was kind of going for, but I would have rather that he didn't, and that he just focused on the small team. But then I guess if you focus on the small team of like people who know about this crazy sci-fi world, then it starts to feel too much like Inception. I don't know. I don't want to focus too much on writing a different film, but I like you. I enjoyed the first half more.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about the fact that you may be right. Like the fact that I'd completely forgotten that the old Bond, a few of the Bond films do end with a siege, effectively, of the enemy base. And to be honest, that may have honestly been what he was going for with it, but I don't think it was conveyed very well. I know we've talked a lot about Inception, but I think it was there were moments where I was really enjoying it, like with the setup to go to the art vault, which I enjoyed.
The whole bit in the airport was great.
Yeah.
Everything from the walking around, like figuring out how they were gonna execute the plan, to the plane crash, to the fight, all great. Everything in the airport, great.
I think it was just a small thing where I feel really bad because now that you've mentioned, like, I'm being a bit more negative than I meant to be. I'm just thinking, I'm doing the same. But in Inception, where all of the small, like, the team get their own sort of mini introduction scene of sorts.
Yes.
And with this one, Robert Pattinson just sort of appears, which is part of which it is explained sort of later on, but you wish you kind of got a bit more character from him right from the start, as well as the sort of the third guy on the team, the guy that's the guy from that Beatles musical.
Oh, right.
Himesh
Is
Patel.
that who he is? Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Is that
Himesh
I never
Patel,
saw
and he
that
just
film.
sort of shows up, and he's there
Yeah.
for like part of the plan, but he just shows up. They do that one, the scene that they have to have in every heist plan where the camera goes in a 360 around them while they talk, and it's definitely not confusing at all for everyone involved. And then again, he shows up in a later plot, and I just think, why have a recurring character that you make him seem like he is an actual character as opposed to just a peon? Like,
Yeah.
and I just remember thinking of like, when they established the anesthesiologist in Inception, it's like a full scene that, one, it establishes him, even though he doesn't have much character in the film, besides the fact that, he's interested in developing concoctions.
Yeah.
But then it also has the scene where he goes underground, and it establishes more of the
world.
fact that this dream science exists and that people want to live in it because it's so, overwhelming and it's so real. Like, that's just another little bit of the world building around this technology.
Aaron Johnson, I know that the sort of when Aaron Johnson appears, it's sort of supposed to be a little sudden and disarming, but it almost felt like he was a character that I was supposed to already know.
Yeah,
from the way
exactly.
that people were talking to him.
Yeah, that's again, that feeds into the idea of, I felt like there was stuff where it wanted me to already know it ahead of time. Like when Himesh Patel showed up, and I was just like, am I meant to know who this guy is? Like, he sort of, from the fact that he's suddenly just ingrained in the group, and they've gone from not trusting anyone to now a random guy's come in, and then they go like, and now this army's here. It just scales up very quickly, very fast.
Yeah, it does.
I think I'm done.
Finished. Yeah, it was a good film. I liked the film.
I will rewatch it.
And I will rewatch it, yes.
With subtitles.
Absolutely.
It's a case where I did really we keep having to say we really enjoyed it, but I did enjoy it. But I enjoy a lot of films where I think they're quite complicated, and I could come out and say to like my family or a lot of people, oh, it's really good, but you've got to pay attention.
Yeah.
This one, I just feel like I don't think I could recommend it to people that I know wouldn't want to go into a film to try and figure out a puzzle.
No, I know you've already mentioned that we keep mentioning Inception, but in the case of Inception, that is a film that the average film goer was able to comprehend enough to turn into a meme. And I don't think that will happen with this. I think with this one, even if you are... With Inception, if you pay attention and you just focus, you'll be fine. With this one, if you pay attention and you focus, you'll probably still get lost at numerous points. In this particular case, I do think that they haven't done the best job at explaining everything.
Oh, yeah.
Properly. If you watch it with subtitles, it'll help, though.
Oh, 100%. Definitely. Like, there are other things where I know people have talked about being confusing, where just through scanning through, like, forums and things, where people are talking about how I don't get how the painting was important and things like that. And I don't mind things like that. Like, that was the plot stuff. For the most part, I didn't find that confusing. Like, like you said, I was waiting for it to get to the confusing bit, and then it hit around 2/3 in. But I don't have a problem with a lot of the filler around the edge, like the subplots and everything. Cool. Well, thank you very much for listening.
It'll be another 6 months before...
Yeah, exactly. If another film decides to come out in cinemas that's worth watching and isn't, £20 on Disney Plus, then we may discuss it.
Are you saying that The New Mutants isn't worth watching?
I could have gone to see it yesterday, and I kind of it doesn't feel real that it's out.
Do you kind of want to preserve it as it is in your mind?
Yeah, I sort of just enjoy it more as the concept of a film that will never be released more than the actual film, because I know it will just be mediocre. Like it's not going to be much of anything.
Yeah, it's better living on in your head.
Exactly. I get more enjoyment out of not watching it than I probably will watching it. But yeah, I'm sure we can do something again in the future when if the planet returns to normal and we don't get, you know, an inverted apocalypse or whatever it was. Do you have anything to add?
No.
That was a very dramatic pause. Okay, cool. Thank you again for listening, and listen again soon. Yeah, that sounds good. Bye.
If you're